Hello, welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford, and I interview inspiring people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, I'm speaking with the head of the Surfrider Foundation, a grassroots environmental organization dedicated to protecting oceans and beaches. Its major work is carried out by 60 local chapters around America that include more than 40,000 members, as well as affiliates in Europe, Brazil, Australia, and Japan. Its membership is made up of surfers, swimmers, divers, bodyboarders, kayakers, and beach enthusiasts who have learned to be effective advocates for the ocean environment they value. Let's save the oceans from us with Chad Nelsen.
How are you?
I'm great, mate. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to chat.
Oh yeah, happy to do it.
Looking great with the surfboard in the background there.
That surfboard actually, that we could talk about it a little bit. It's got a good story. All those signatures on that board are small businesses that support sort of Surfrider Foundation, and we're opposed to offshore drilling. We were doing a big campaign to stop drilling off the coast of the United States.
One of your many campaigns. How do you keep track of them all? You need another surfboard with all the campaigns written on.
Yeah, we use the internet for that. In databases.
I was checking it out. First of all, I want to say, great job. Thanks for everything you're doing on behalf of everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm interviewing with this podcast. I'm trying to speak to people in service to others and support them with a song. So you can use this song on your website or in a video or to raise awareness. Yeah.
I love the concept. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And so I was hoping to see huge rollers behind you, but that would be even cooler now. How far away from you?
You know, it's funny because there's actually I'm in Laguna. I'm in San Clemente now. I say Laguna Beach. That's where I live, Southern California, and there's actually great surf right now. So there is great waves out there, but you know, I didn't think that would necessarily it'd be too distracting for this podcast. I should be sitting down at the beach, but
yeah, that would be great because you grew up in Laguna Beach, huh?
I did. I grew up in Laguna Beach, which was, you know, I didn't make that decision. My parents did, but it was which I'm very grateful for. It was a very sort of privileged life in and amongst the ocean, which at the time I didn't realize how lucky I was because that's just what it was as a kid. And now with a little perspective, I realize sort of how fortunate that was.
Yeah, it's one of those iconic spots like Byron Bay or... Yeah, they actually made a TV series, did they, about Laguna?
Yes, they did. It was about the high school, which I live very close to. It was like a reality show, The Real Laguna Beach, which I'm not sure how real it was, but yeah, it was interesting because the popularity of the town really soared after that. You know, for better or worse, but
depending on your perspective, yeah. Yeah, that must have been, because I live in the south of Italy now. I'm English, I grew up in England, but here I've got 5 minutes from the beach, but it's the Mediterranean. There's no waves. Very
calm, yeah.
Yeah, it's very calm. So I was just trying to imagine in my mind, like, how it would change my life if there was this surfing culture here, if you did get up and everyone got up in the morning early and, you know, paddled out, and what a way to start the day. I've just been imagining, you know.
Yeah, no, it is. It's, you know, it's interesting. Surfers actually are in the ocean more than any other user group sort of on a annual basis. So, you know, you have more people go to the beach, but they don't all go in the water. You know, even scuba divers are very avid, but, you know, surfers are like I probably surf 100 days a year, maybe more. You know, so they're in the water, and then, you know, fish, there's a lot of people fish, but they're on top. So there's very few divers who dive 100 days a year. And so really surfers are out there, they're in the water. You're literally in it, right? You're ducking under it. You're getting tossed around in it. It's going up your nose and into your mouth. But you know, that immersive sort of intimate experience with the ocean is pretty awesome.
So do you go out early in the morning to get the waves?
So, you can surf at any time, most places, but not true everywhere. The conditions are better in the mornings. And that's has to do with physics. The ocean temperature is pretty stable. The land heats up during the day and cools off in the evening. So in the mornings, the land is cool, the water is warm relative, and that sucks the wind offshore, which makes the wind blow towards the ocean, which is holds up the waves and makes the waves better. And then as the day goes on, the land heats up and it sucks the air off the water towards the land, and that's called an onshore wind, which is not as desirable for surfing. So that's why,
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's why in most places it's better in the mornings. Not true everywhere. Plus, you can get up like runners or others and get it done. Get in the water before you have to go to work.
So what time do you get in the morning in the sea? What time is it?
Usually, I am waiting for the sunrise. So right now, where I live, you can be surfing at 5:30, even a little earlier than that. In the wintertime, it's later, 6:30.
Right.
So you wait for that. Usually they call it the dawn patrol. The goal is to get there at first light.
Mm. And then at what time do you finish?
And it depends. If I have to go to work, could be an hour. If I have to somewhere to be, if I have more time, I could surf for a couple hours. Sometimes
Okay.
I wear out. It depends on the conditions. Because the other factor is the tide.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the surf spot you're at, some are more sensitive to tide and others. So some places like a low tide, so you're trying to time the days of the week with the swell, with tide, and other places need a middle tide or a higher tide, and because there's rocks or reef or other things. And so you're kind of looking at the surf conditions, the wind, and the tide are kind of the three big factors.
Okay. Well, it's not going to be a surf lesson. I'm just to fuel my imagination because
Yeah.
I was never really into it before. It has the kind of culture of it's that California culture and the surfing. It's not something I've been into before. But then on a meditation course, I did this 10-day retreat, and then the guy afterwards we kind of talk about your experiences, and I think two of the guys there were surfers, and they just had this amazing meditation experiences because they could let go, and they kind of explained that they were just used to doing it on the waves. You just kind of lean forward into the abyss, and that really affected their mental state and ability to let go. Is that something you've also experienced, though?
Yeah, I think there's two things. There's a guy named Walls J. Nichols, a friend of mine, who wrote a book called Blue Mind. And that book, they actually kind of paired ocean conservation, ocean recreation, surfers and stuff with a bunch of sort of neurologists and looked at sort of calming of the water broadly. So just sitting in front of the ocean, surfing or no surfing, has a measurable calming effect. That's why I think we all seek the ocean, right? That's why an ocean view is what you want at your resort or your house or anything else. But so there's that benefit of it. And then with surfing, I think like a lot of other adrenaline sports, rock climbing or flying down a hill on your mountain bike, it puts you in the moment, right? You're like trying to navigate this wave, and there's a lot of things happening around you, and you're sort of doing a dance with the wave, right? You take off and the wave's going to do things and you need to be in sync with it, but it requires like total presence. So in that moment, you're not thinking about your to-do list or that thing you forgot, that forgot to call your friend for their birthday. You're in the moment, right? And I think like so many other sports, that's part of the attractiveness is it clears your head of, all the other things going on around you.
Yeah, well, these are the kind of things I guess talking about is nothing like actually doing. So we should probably move on to, because you've taken your awareness, you've taken this awareness of nature, and you're pouring your life into Surfrider. So So what is Surfrider?
So the Surfrider Foundation is a grassroots coastal ocean, and let me say that again. I should be able to rattle off our mission statement. Think, huh?
That's the basics, Chad. Come on.
The mission statement, I'll start there, is, we're an organization dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of the world's ocean waves and beaches through a powerful activist network. So what that really means is we're this sort of US-based, but really global grassroots coastal and ocean conservation organization. And the idea is there are people in coastal communities around the world who love the ocean, commune with the ocean, get so much from the ocean that they're going to be motivated to give back and steward the place that they love.
And so it's not just for surfers, it can be for anyone can join.
Yeah. Sort of founded by surfers in 1984, and really actually, interestingly enough, Surfrider is the name of a beach. So it was really about protecting a place more than it was the verb of like riding waves. But, it's close ties to surfing since the beginning. It was kind of it was surfing's first conservation group. So it has a tie to surfing, but absolutely, like for anyone who loves the ocean, loves the coast, we've got people who surf. We've got people who live in coastal communities. We've got moms of kids who surf and people who like to walk their dog on the beach in the morning. Anyone who cares about the ocean, which I think is everyone.
Yeah. Reminds me if I had the chairman of the campaign for nuclear disarmament in England come on the show. And I was saying if you live in France, you live in Germany, you should still join CND because if the bombs go off there, So, and it's the same with all the work you're doing. I mean, we all need the oceans. We all enjoy them.
Right.
So,
absolutely. I mean, it's funny, we just celebrated Earth Day, a couple months back, and then we had World Ocean Day, which is in the early June. And, it's really an ocean planet, right? 70% of this planet is covered by water. So we have Earth Day. It should really be Ocean Day.
yeah.
And, it provides half the oxygen we breathe and regulates the temperature. I mean, the only reason England is, habitable by humans is because the warm ocean currents from the Gulf Stream pump up that warm water. And so we really, all of us, no matter where we live, are relying on the ocean for some element of our lives.
Yeah, and global warming as well. The ice is melting, and so you're really covering everything. So what kind of things are you doing? What kind of initiatives?
Sure. So we kind of focus on 5 broad areas of work at Surfrider: clean water, trying to make sure that the oceans are clean to recreate in and also for marine life. What we call beach preservation, coastal erosion issues, sea level rise, coastal flooding, plastic pollution is another big issue that's sort of global. Beach access, making sure we have access to our beaches, because that's not always the case. And what we call ocean protection, which is either proactively trying to establish protection of the ocean through marine protected areas, and also sort of reactively or defensively try to stop bad projects like offshore drilling or other things that could provide harm to the ocean. So 5 different areas that cumulatively will lead to healthy oceans and coasts.
That's a broad area. So that's kind of grassroots and also, targeting the legislator. That's quite a spectrum of work.
We sort of start locally, and I can give you an example of it. We tend to work in local communities where our grassroots activists, of which there are tens of thousands, are like living, and they know the people and the government systems. And we then try to scale that work up in the states to the state level. And then we try to get up to the federal level. So an example would be, plastic pollution is a huge problem in our oceans. These single-use plastic items that we use that are so wasteful, the bags and the straws and the lids and the foam, things we use once and then end up in the ocean for, tens of thousands of years sometimes. So we'll, for example, work in a community to ban single-use bags. Then we'll replicate that we did this in California a decade ago. We'll replicate that in tens of communities and then hundreds of communities. And then at some point we'll be like, wow, we have half the state under local bag ordinances. Let's pass state legislation. There's momentum for that. And then we'll, right now, I think 7 or 8 states in the United States have started to have regulations on plastic pollution. And now we have a bill in Congress at the federal level to try to eliminate these single-use plastics. So our sort of method is start at the bottom with the grassroots, scale up to the higher levels over time by building some momentum and inertia for these types of activities.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because I mean, that's how I first heard of you, is through the campaigning, because it's also something I feel very passionate about. And because I also heard from another, my guests educate me all the time. I'm just recycling things I've heard, and no pun intended, but recycling I heard it was invented by the corporations to kind of shift the responsibility, saying, really, you guys, we're just making it, so it's you should recycle it.
Yeah. No, it's true. And not only that, recycling is largely a myth.
Okay.
It's funny because, a lot of us, I grew up thinking that was like your one sort of signature environmental action. Well, I
Right.
recycle, I would go to cocktail parties and say, "Oh, you work for the Surfrider Foundation." It was like I was the Pope and they needed to confess. They would look at me and say, "I recycle," and I'm like, "That's great."
Come into the
Uh,
kitchen.
yeah. But we only recycle about 9% of the plastic we produce. 91% ends up in the landfill or in the environment. And then a lot of the plastic historically was, I don't know where Europe's plastic goes, but the United States, we would ship our plastic to Asia under this guise that somehow it would be recycled or there would be a market for it in Asia. And frankly, most of it wasn't recycled.
It's floating back towards you.
Yeah, well, then we turn around and say, well, the plastic's coming from Asia. And it's like, well, that's actually started with us. We're the number one plastic producing country in the world. And so this idea of recycling, you're right. And even now with the increased awareness and pressure, the sort of the big plastic companies, the Nestle's and the Cokes and the Pepsis of the world are, spending billions on recycling. We can do better. We can recycle it. And the reality is that we should, sure, we should recycle and we should do better and we should close the loop and create what they call the circular economy. But the other reality is there's so much single-use plastic we use that we just don't need to use,
Yeah. And the energy to recycle that plastic because when a glass bottle breaks in the ocean, it's sand. It
started as sand, it goes back to sand. Yeah.
So why aren't they using glass?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about plastic, I guess, that is remarkable, right, is it's kind of this, in some ways, is this amazing material. It's cheap. It's too cheap. We can talk about that. Back to who's responsible. It can be flexible. It's lightweight and it's pretty strong. So the glass has the disadvantages of being more fragile. It breaks, and it's heavy. So if we were shipping all this single-use plastic bottles of water and glass around the world, that would have a different environmental footprint, which would be a carbon footprint.
Oh, okay.
But we also, in many places in the world, it comes out of the tap just fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We have seen a move towards reusable bottles, which is great, and that's a perfect example. You think about this water sits on the shelf in some supermarket in a plastic bottle.
Yeah, you're drinking it.
Then you drink it and then you throw it away, and there's a tap somewhere nearby. Not true for everywhere in the world, but with clean water coming out of it, it's
and you think they wash out those bottles before they fill them with water? You think they're
well, not to mention there's that, and then the water they're filling with is they try to tell you it's spring water from the Alps, but typically it's coming out of a tap, just like the water in your house.
I couldn't believe that in America. Yeah, when I was going there, I had to get the spring water, because here in Italy they drink from the bottles as well, because quite often the tap water tastes of chlorine. But if you work out the cost, you'd be better putting a filter in your house to save yourself. They carry up liters and liters of water every day to their houses.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Let's just we built this distribution system for water around the globe. Let's treat it and make that drinkable. So
yeah, instead of flushing the toilet, flushing away with your drinking water.
Yeah,
you poop.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you were running. Okay. There was some legislation. I was listening on a podcast. I think it was from last year where you were talking about it, and there was some big legislation going through that could change it. What's the story with that?
Yeah, the other thing about the plastic is that almost every step of its life cycle, the plastic is polluting. And so, the plastic's a fossil fuel, actually. It's made from, ethane. So we have a bill, federal bill here in the States called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, that we call it a comprehensive bill because it kind of looks at the plastic production for its whole life cycle. So from these ethane cracker plants that they use to produce the plastic sort of base materials, which tend to be in, lower income industrial areas, and they have their own polluting impacts. So there's an environmental justice issue with where the plastic gets produced in the first place. There's communities that are being sort of unfairly impacted by that. They produce a little product called a nurdle.
Oh, I've heard of these. Yeah, yeah.
So mermaid's tears is another name for them. This is a little plastic pellet that that they transport around. That gets melted and molded into whatever the product is.
There was one ship, I think, off the coast of Sri Lanka, or I think it was that just one ship was on fire and was breaking up, and all these nurdles were just covering.
Trillions of them are out there. I mean, when it's funny, even when I was a little kid, this is in the late 70s, early 80s in Laguna Beach, we would sit down at the beach and play in the sand, and you'd find these little, which what I now know are nurdles, but we didn't know what they were. These little kind of like translucent circular things, and we didn't know what they were. We would debate, is that, part of a fish? What is this thing? We never thought, and it turns out it was these plastic things, because in LA, I'm sure, or in Southern California, wherever it's industrial, they're using these things by the millions, and then invariably they spill out of whatever their production facility or transport facility and, wash down the storm drains and the rivers to the ocean. And then they show up on the beaches. And so that's a product that pollutes, and then whatever single use item they create, the bag or the bottle or the foam, those things hopefully end up in the landfill, which, is better presumably than on the land or in the ocean. So that what this bill really seeks to sort of regulate the plastic production at the start, so we can be less harmful to these communities and less polluting, eliminate a lot of these single-use plastic items that are just wasteful. We use once and they last forever. And then third, and this is I think maybe the most important part, is it creates something called extended producer responsibility. And the idea here is that the plastic producing companies and businesses actually have to be responsible for the end life of the plastic. And the problem right now is too cheap. A company can make a bag of what you would call crisps or chips, and they cost them a cent. You buy that bag at the store, their job is done. They had a cheap and easy way to get that food to you. Then that bag, you throw it away, and you either pay the municipal cost of that, then we landfill it somewhere, or you recycle it and it ends up in Indonesia, or it ends up on the street and in the ocean, and we pay the societal cost. So we pay for the costs of that cheap bag all the way through the life cycle of it. And, if that bag cost a nickel instead of a penny, then maybe the plastic producing, companies would think more about the use of that product. Maybe they'd be more efficient in the packaging. Maybe they'd use alternatives. And if nothing else, that fee will help, address some of the problems. So this idea of extending the responsibility to the producer is I think, really important.
And how is the bill doing?
Well, it's slowly but surely gaining some steam. So the game is to get the legislative sponsors. It's tough to get anything done in the United States right now with a pretty divided Congress. But, we're in this for the long haul. It took us 6 tries to get the first bag ban 10 years ago in California. So we'll be continuing to plug away. I think, we're getting some momentum, which is good.
Yeah. I heard you say on another show, 70 companies responsible for virtually all the pollution in the world. Was that right? Or...
I know that's I know that's true for the carbon emission.
Was it? Okay.
But it's and I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but it's something similar. There's a small number of these large companies that are producing a huge amount of plastics in the world. And so, like you mentioned earlier, they have the same playbook, which is, let's try to put the responsibility on the individual versus us. So this is the recycle or worry about your carbon footprint. And certainly we should all do those things, but that's not the solution. The solution is actually systemic change, sort of at the top.
Yeah. One of them was Jim Radcliffe, and he owns Ineos, which is a big plastic producer, and he lives on a boat, a very, very big boat. And, he came by here because I had a cycle touring company, so I'd take people guide people on the bikes for a while, and he has like 20 bikes on the boat or something, and he's cycling around. He's a big cyclist. He sponsors now a Tour de France a world tour team, and so he was cycling up all the mountains around the world, Well, he's doing it. He's probably working hard on the boat, but so his whole business is just making this plastic, and he lives on a boat.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just these one or two guys. You know, it's not. It's just.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, you don't know this, but I've been interviewing some other people. I watched the documentary The Corporation, and I was so enthused with that, and you realize how all these corporations are responsible for all the damage. You know.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get to zero cost, exactly like you're saying. You know.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, it's hard because a corporation doesn't have morals, right? It's their goal is to maximize profit, and they build a machine, and that machine is driven for this. And, in some ways, that's the system, right? That's what it's designed to do, and it has benefits. We all have iPhones or whatever it is. We're talking on the internet, but that's why we need the other side of it, which is this balance with these regulations that are going to look out for the general public and, the future. And, our philosophy is like that, those corporations, they have the money. And so their political influence is through dollars in lobbying, which they have a lot of, but we actually have the numbers.
Right.
We have the people. There's very few people are going to show up at a city council meeting or at a congressional hearing to defend the single-use water bottle, other than the guys who are making a lot of money. And so, our sort of fundamental belief is that we need people to get engaged in civic action at the local, state, federal level, because if everyone who went to the beach and saw plastic on the beach or in the ocean and didn't want to see it got involved, like, we actually have the advantage in a democracy, which is that we can vote our way out of these problems and force guys like that to be responsible for the problems that their company is creating, which they should be. And probably if you ask them, they would say, sure, but we're following the rules. And we're like, all right, well, let's make the rules more strict.
Yeah. And he'd probably say, you guys buy it, you buy it in the supermarket, you have the choice, Yeah. Yeah. And, people avoid them too. And it's funny because there's something, I don't know if you've heard this term, the purity test. This happens anytime we talk about global warming. They say, oh, well, yeah, you want to reduce plastic, or you want to, get rid of emissions, but you drive a car, you own a surfboard made of, sort of. Your surfboard's plastic.
Plastic. It's made of, like polystyrene foam and all these things. So how dare you talk about this? And, the purity test is this idea that you can't have a political opinion unless you're perfect, because otherwise you're a hypocrite. And, it's just, therefore, since nobody's perfect, nobody can have an opinion and we can't change anything. So if you play out the purity test to its logical conclusion, it doesn't make any sense, because then no one can say anything. So you can be imperfect and live in an imperfect world and still strive for change. I mean, all of us use plastic in our lives. It's impossible to get rid of it. There are some people out there that really work hard to minimize it, the super devoted people, and they're showing us what's possible. But, wouldn't it be better if when you walked into the market, instead of a shelves lined with products wrapped in plastic, which is pretty much every single thing in the market, you walked into a market that was full of glass and there was containers to use? I mean, until that system is changed, the individual choice is going to be really hard to get us there.
Yeah.
No matter how diligent you are or committed you are as an individual.
One thing I've noticed in Italy with the single-use plastic is with COVID, they're really going up. I mean, are you seeing masks catching on your surfboard?
Oh yeah, the COVID was a plastic disaster.
Right.
And understandably, right? Particularly in the beginning when there was so much concern about surfaces and we just didn't know, and everyone understandably was afraid of this thing. I mean, I know Italy was hit really hard, and so we saw, and restaurants closed. So we saw takeout, which always, when you finish takeout meal, you have a mound of plastic in your kitchen or on your table. And then we saw the masks and the gloves, and all of these different sort of the wipes from the the PPE stuff just everywhere. So the combination of all those things. The other thing that happened, which was kind of an interesting bright spot, is, I wonder if you saw this too, is given the the people, the flexibility, the fact that some people lost their jobs, which was too bad. People flocked to the beaches. We're seeing doubling in the number of beach use in the United States,
but
doubling in the number of surfers.
Laguna was closed for a long time, though. I saw online.
Yeah, a lot of places. What happened, it was an interesting cycle. So COVID hit, 16 months ago, society shut down. And then that first 6-week period, people, restaurants, museums, everything shut down. So people actually flocked to the beaches. It was something to do with fresh air. And so then the beaches became overrun. And so then like my town and towns up and down the coast, all over the country, they shut the beaches down because the beaches were getting too crowded because there was fear that people would be too close to each other. And we actually did a lot of work last spring and summer we worked with public health experts and some beach access sort of legal experts and to develop some plans to help communities and states open their beaches back up. Because, as the science was evolving, we were learning that, fresh air is better. And if you're reasonably spaced outside, it's actually safe. So we worked pretty hard to get beaches back open. But that combination of more beach use, more takeout, more PE has just led to, we're starting to, and then they suspended a lot of the rules. Like in California, we had you couldn't hand out single-use bags at the grocery store, or there was a fee associated with them. And those were all waived because they didn't want you bringing in your own bag for fear of contamination too. Or, you can't go to the coffee shop and use your reusable mug.
No.
So that stuff's that's all kind of come back. But yeah, it was a real setback. You still see the masks everywhere.
Wow. Your work touches so many areas I never realized before. It's like,
yeah, I mean, that was I don't think any of us were expecting the COVID pandemic, nor did we anticipate this sort of setback to our plastic pollution work, but it was an eye-opener.
Yeah. It was kind of ironic because here in Italy we had the lockdown. We weren't allowed to go outside to exercise, and they were applauding for people staying on their couches, but the people that were hardest hit, diabetics, overweight, so they weren't allowed to go outside to exercise. So it was really crazy time. So.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, and if anything, I think it revealed that we need to create more open spaces in our society and make those more accessible to more people, so that there is ways to get out. Yeah. Pandemic or not.
Yeah. Surfing. Yeah. No, I definitely try. I mean, I live so close to the beach, but I don't go very often. And knowing I was speaking to you, I was on the lookout. I was walking and I see the plastic pollution, and one of the worst things is that the fishermen, they take these polystyrene polyp, the big white for keeping things cool, the fish cool, and those things break.
We call it a cooler.
Oh, okay. They're the disposable ones though. And they're made of white balls, and they break up into one of those will cover a beach. One this size.
Oh yeah, you could spend your lifetime just picking up 1 square meter of sand with all the little pieces of foam. Yeah, I know that's another example of this. It's what I think of as a fundamental design flaw. Those coolers they break anyway.
Yeah,
they never last, and so like they're even from the user perspective, they're a bad product, and then they break down, and those little balls will last forever in the ocean.
But to take them on a boat when you're a fisherman, and you're gonna fish are gonna eat them, and then when you cut open the fish,
they'll be in there.
They'll be.
I know, and it's interesting. A reusable plastic cooler. That's a good use of plastic, right? If you have a plastic cooler that lasts you for your lifetime, that's plastic being used in a wise way. One cooler, you can pass it down to your kids. It'll last and last and last. Is one alternative, and then Igloo, which is a big cooler company here in the States, they actually just invented a really good disposable cooler that's made for wood pulp and like paper pulp and wax, paraffin.
Oh, wow.
And it's totally biodegradable in the natural environment, and it'll last a week, with water in it. And so it's a great solution to those horrific foam coolers.
And people will pay more for this, so maybe the companies just, the companies are not going to stop making money. They're going to they're so efficient. If they're not, no legislation like this is going to going to hurt them. They could end up actually making more money, as you pay more.
Yeah, these things I think are, $8 instead of $4, but still,
right.
But it's still it's a viable alternative if you show up somewhere for a holiday and you don't have a cooler and you want to keep your drinks cold or your fish fresh, then there's an alternative.
But also, I always try and look for the BPA free as well, because I'm a cyclist and I buy those, but they still taste after a while, and you wonder how it affects your fertility as well, because all this plastic is seeping into our bodies. And
I think the health effects are not super well understood yet, but the phthalates and the other things they put in plastics to make them soft and flexible are not good. And the fact that you can taste it tells you something's going on. So it's kind of nasty all around. And that's why it's interesting. I actually just got a stainless steel water bottle. I'm a mountain biker. Also, I just got a stainless steel sort of cycling water bottle instead of the plastic one, and it works great.
Yeah, it doesn't have that bad taste in it.
No, and it's got a straw in it that's silicone, which is better. You can't squeeze it, right, which is what you do, but they designed it so that it pours out. It's great.
Right. Yeah, I guess this kind of carrot and the stick, that we all know the pollution's bad, but if it starts to affect my health, then I start to worry a lot more, because...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the BPA thing is interesting. We were, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, we were working with one of the sort of plastic reusable water bottle companies as an alternative, right? That it's, again, plastic, but lasts forever and you can use it. And they had BPA in it. And we were arguing, at the time, is this good? Is this bad? The jury's sort of out. The science wasn't clear. And at least in the United States, it was basically a bunch of moms who were buying bottles for their kids for school, who just used their consumer power for good and said, we're not going to buy that. I'm not going to risk it. And, these companies got rid of the BPA like that. As soon as the power of the moms who were like, I'm not going to purchase that for my child.
So isn't it ironic?
Settled.
It's ironic with our consumer society. We pay more for less. Or this is, take out this, I'll pay more. Take out this, I'll pay more. Take gluten free,
right?
The preservative free, I'll pay. The advertising is they're putting less in. We're completely insane. This society is,
Yeah. Well, I think we're slowly but surely reverse engineering from a sort of engineered chemical lifestyle to getting back to a more natural lifestyle, right? We pay for more for food that doesn't contain poison, like insecticides and pesticides and organic food. And, and so I feel like slowly but surely we're climbing out of a time where I think we were, naively thought all these chemicals were the solution and didn't come with problems.
No. I guess all the images help of all these, the big plastic in this, it forms in the middle of the oceans. It's not like on the beaches is a small part, no, unless you're in a certain island that you see. But how big are these? How much plastic is there out there?
Well, it's funny, this idea of the island of plastic in the middle of the sea is also a bit of a myth. You can't actually see it from space or walk on it. It's just an area of higher concentration. So the ocean has 5 gyres. So these are these big spinning global currents. And so, for example, you're in the Mediterranean, but there's a current that comes across the equator from Africa, hits the Caribbean, goes up along Florida. They call it the Gulf Stream, eventually points up towards England and eventually curves down the European coastline to Africa and back out. So there's they call that the North Atlantic Gyre, and it's big circular clockwise rotation. And there's one in the southern hemisphere that goes in the opposite direction, that comes up the coast of Africa, hits the equator, goes across, and then comes down the coast of South America. And the same is true in the Pacific. There's a North Pacific Gyre and a South Pacific Gyre. And so those things are swirling. And so if I throw a bottle in the ocean, conceivably it could go all the way to Japan.
Wow.
And if something in Japan, like the tsunami debris from the big tsunami and earthquakes, that debris actually landed in Alaska and in the Pacific Northwest in Canada and Oregon or Washington. But so those cycles are taking the plastic almost like a toilet and spinning it around, or your drain in your sink, and concentrating it in the middle. That's why you see this idea of this island. But if you sailed to the middle of the, North Atlantic, you wouldn't see it. You would just start to see more pieces around. So the concentrations have increased. But yeah, I think one of the reasons that this plastic pollution issue has become so apparent is because it's visible, right? You deal with it every day in your life. You see it on the sides of the road. You see it in the ocean. I mean, every single time I go surfing, I can pull a piece of plastic out of the sea. So we have our work to do.
Yeah. Well, that's just, thank God we have people like you who are, is there a competition for world's coolest CEO? Are you is there a...
It's funny. I think the plastic pollution issue, and at least in my experience, has come on quickly, and people are motivated to make change. And we're seeing change happen in the United States and certainly in Europe, who were arguably ahead of us. And so it is gratifying to see some action taking place. It's a big problem, just like climate change is. But, I feel like there's progress being made, and that's kind of certainly what keeps me going.
Yeah, well, so what should people do listening to this podcast?
So if Surfrider, we have Surfrider Europe, Surfrider based in Biarritz, but they're the US, Senegal, which is a new Surfrider affiliate, Australia, Japan, and Argentina. So if you're in any of those places, you can go to surfrider.org, our website, and get involved with some of our grassroots activities. You can make these daily choices to get rid of these single-use plastics in your life, which will help at the end of the day. So stop buying that water bottle and get a reusable bottle and coffee mug, and avoid the straw and all of that. Use a bag. And then you can get involved with advocating for plastic reduction laws and regulations, which are taking place all over the world. So when I travel, I'll go to Chile or New Zealand or somewhere to go surf, and you'll see that they're also, handing out reusable bags. And so the world's changing, so people can get involved in creating that change no matter where they live.
Okay, great. And they can also, do you have a membership scheme, or they can donate on the website, or?
Yeah, they can donate to us. If they're domestic, they can join as a member, or in Europe.
Okay.
As well. If they go to surfrider.org, they can find ways to get active, or they can find ways to support us financially. We're a nonprofit charity.
Right.
So we survive on donations. So those always help.
Wow. Brilliant. Oh, this has been great. Thanks, Chad. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I mean, we covered a lot.
Yeah.
I guess I do. I think it's a heavy topic, and there's a lot of problems out there, but I also think that I'm an optimist at heart. And I think anyone who's in the business of creating social or environmental change, it has to be an optimist, because the only reason you're doing this work is because you think we can get to a better place. And, so I think these topics can be a little heavy and depressing, but I encourage people to stay hopeful, because we are making change. And I think that's pretty encouraging, and I'm convinced we're going to get there.
How did you join the organization? How did you first come into contact?
I grew up as we said at the start, I grew up on the beaches in Laguna Beach, and I felt like the ocean just gave me so much, and it's sort of twofold. I wanted to find a career that I could sort of think and be part of and engage in the ocean in my life. So I was motivated by that. And, I volunteered at Surfrider, in high school and as a grad student, and was like, wow, this is a great organization where people can make a difference. And I love the sort of attitude and the approach. And so I was an intern here, and then, got lucky enough almost 20 years ago. I've been here for a long time to land a job, and I've been sort of chugging away ever since, and eventually, made it up to the top.
Yeah. I heard your story about you were a lifeguard one time, and they dumped some yellow paint.
Yeah, that was, why. Yeah, horrifying. I can tell that story pretty quickly. I was, a teenager. I was lifeguarding down at a beautiful, pristine cove in Laguna Beach, white sand, blue water. It was the middle of the day on a summer day, so the beach wasn't very crowded. And I watched this front loader, with the tube thing in the front up in the air, driving down the beach, which, they're not allowed to do, for one thing. And so I'm looking at this thing, it's 100 yards or so down the beach. And I'm like, what is that guy doing? And he's sort of driving it straight to the ocean. And I'm like, I couldn't imagine what he was going to do. Like, why is he driving? He shouldn't be on the beach. Why is he driving towards the ocean? And he gets right to the edge of the water, and he just dumps the thing, and it was full of yellow paint. And it comes, I don't know how many, gallons of paint, and it just floods down onto the beach and creates this big yellow plume in the ocean. And he kind of shakes it around in the sand, and he drives off. And I just was like mind blown. And it turns out that they're painting those yellow lines on the streets. They were resurfacing the streets, and they were painting the yellow lines on the streets. So presumably they finished up the lines, and this was all the excess paint. And they thought, what do we do with this? Well, let's just dump it in the ocean, which is kind of an unimaginable, historically, I think that was, the ocean, it's so vast. It'll just absorb whatever we throw at it. But that was one of those, like, that's wrong. Why is that happening? One of the things that sort of motivated me to get involved in this work.
Yeah, maybe that was a small sacrifice for the ocean that you have changed your life course. And
yeah, maybe I've tried to make up for that guy.
yeah. Gosh, did you catch him?
No, I was like a young teenager. I watched the whole thing happen. I wasn't sure what to do. I think I might have called. You can call, pick up the phone and call the main desk, and they said, okay, we'll put in a call or deal with it. And I don't know. I never actually heard any outcome, so I don't know. Today's world, I could have taken a video of it, and I think that would have been a game changer. And it was just, me, and I don't know if it was a contractor or municipal guy, but I don't think anything came of it.
All right. Well, you came of it, so that's great.
Yeah. It motivated me for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Chad. This has been great. I'll get to work on a song.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I look forward to hearing it. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Out there in the middle of each ocean is a high-pressure gyre with little motion. The rubbish collects there, it swirls in from everywhere, and there it forms a plastic sea. The bad news is the problem's getting smaller. The pieces are too big now to get from a trawler. Just 'cause it don't break down doesn't mean it can't be ground. Now everywhere's a plastic sea. The process has already long begun. Soon there'll be more plastic than plankton. It works its way up the food chain, makes a home in your brain. Welcome to the plastic sea. Don't be surprised the next time you got a fish and you find its stomach filled with plastic bits. The chemicals in its flesh that soon you will ingest as you eat into the plastic sea. They're already discussing the possibilities of how it affects our virility. They said there was no proof, but now nobody can reproduce. Of course it was the plastic sea. They say there's no reversal, it's only gonna get worse. So you better keep your DNA on ice. Then as the sea levels rise, keep your eggs and your sperm held high. Don't use an oil-based lube, put them in a glass test tube as you wade into the plastic sea. And in 10,000 years' time, when they digged out of the plastic line, we got what we deserve, but at least we are preserved perfectly in the plastic sea. Perfectly in the plastic sea. Forever in the plastic sea. Forever in the plastic sea.
I hope you enjoyed that. Please go to surfrider.org and make a donation. You don't have to own a surfboard to support Surfrider Foundation. The song will be available on Spotify, iTunes and Deezer in a couple of weeks, then you can share it there as well. Please share this episode with everyone who you think might enjoy it. And a big thanks to my musicians Maurizio Sanicola, Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcioni, and my researcher Dori Verbo for making this episode possible. See you next time.